100 miles away from it. On September 15th, in the year 1901, historic news comes from Buffalo, New York. The President of the United States, William McKinley, is dead. William McKinley, shot by an anarchist at the Pan American Expedition. The first citizen begins his last journey home to his native Ohio. Changes instantaneously. The high place left vacant by the murder of the mild McKinley is filled by yesterday's vice president, today's explosive chief executive, Theodore Roosevelt of Sagamore Hill. The capital of the nation has moved to Sagamore Hill, according to the newspapers. The Roosevelt House at Oyster Bay, Long Island, becomes a new executive mansion. A placid, rustic background for the dynamic human being whose personality will mark an age in American life. To enter the house is to know the man. Many-sided, colorful, unconventional. A lieutenant colonel of his own Rough Riders in the Spanish-American War, and hero of the assault on San Juan Hill. Harvard graduate and Dakota cowboy. Naturalist and big game hunter. Formerly Police Commissioner of New York City, Governor of New York State, Assistant Secretary of the Navy. A man with a love of life, love of people, love of action. Now, by a fluke of fortune, 26th President of the United States. Theodore Roosevelt sets a brand new style for presidency. He urges his fellow citizens to live the strenuous life and scorn the slothful ease of the mollycoddle. A newspaper poet gleefully notes that at Sagamore Hill, the president runs at large and plays like a boy let loose for the holidays. Down there by the bay, he gets his rest in a strenuous way. I believe in the joy of living, says Theodore Roosevelt. He has what he calls a rattling good time being president. Just being Theodore Roosevelt, a Yankee Doodle dandy. And millions share the fun of it with him. He's headed, TR, the Colonel. And his countrymen use his own favorite word to describe him. Bully. Through the Roosevelt years, much of the nation's business is run from Sagamore Hill, between horseback rides. With his son Archie as unofficial assistant, the president issues statements, forms policy, and keeps his finger on the pulse of a country as restless, energetic, self-confident as he. But the country, with the enormous expansion of industry, is rapidly turning from the rural way of life. Factory towns are springing up, absorbing the torrent of immigrants. But that is not enough. The machines must recruit additional help from the farm. The full dinner pail is a Republican slogan. And there are more full dinner pails than ever before. But the rising tide of new jobs, new products, new national wealth exacts its cruel toll. In child labor, in back-breaking hours, in underpaid women. The abuse and degradation of human beings by the machine. America begins to sit in judgment on herself. With the spread of mass production comes a crusading cry from writers, from labor, from politicians, from all enlightened leaders for social justice and reform to keep pace with the increasing mechanization that is revolutionizing American life and living. once poured into pioneering now go into the development of business and industry, into new inventions that will set the 20th century apart from all others for the scope and swiftness of the changes it brings. And profound change comes with the development of the internal combustion engine. The internal combustion engine mounted on wheels to form a portable fountain of energy. The horseless carriage, the gas buggy, the automobile. More than a mechanism, a challenge, an adventure. A hardy new American aristocracy springs up, the automobility, an astonishment to man and beast. Sociologists roundly denounce it as a picture of the arrogance of wealth, but others recognize it as man's new servant, which miraculously modifies time and distance. What had been 10 miles becomes 1. What had been an hour becomes 10 minutes. With the automobility come new styles: goggles, linen dusters, motoring bays. You've heard the old familiar line, the cart before the horse. But now it has changed to suit the time. The cart without a horse. Some say that autoists who tear along at 15 and sometimes even 20 miles an hour should be locked up. But, says Mr. Dooley, the comic philosopher of the day, don't you think a man who owns an automobile is punished enough? You have to get out and get under, to fix his little machine. An American who invented the automobile, but it is the Americans who make it into one of the most significant inventions of all time, by means of the assembly line, interchangeable parts, mass production. From a single factory in a single day come 1,000 efficient, cheap machines. A revolution in daily life spreads through all levels of society as the automobile becomes available everywhere, in cities, wealth and goods in a single nation. Never before such a diffusion of wealth and goods among its people. On Broad Street in New York, the Curb Exchange is handling securities the conservative stock exchange declines to list. Brokers on the street receive orders by hand signal from their telephone clerks inside. Business is big and getting bigger. Too big, many fear. It is a time of industrial czars, like John D. Rockefeller of oil. Andrew Carnegie of steel. J.P. Morgan of Wall Street. Against what Theodore Roosevelt brands as the tyranny of plutocracy, he trumpets a crusade and becomes Teddy the Trust Buster. Re-elected by a landslide, no longer a political accident, the president continues to stir and stimulate the people with his fighting oratory. Says Mr. Dooley, a reproof from him is the same thing as a compound fracture. A word of caution will lay a man up for a week, and a severe reprimand will send him through life with a wooden leg. It isn't all oratory. He expands the powers of the presidency. He builds the Panama Canal. He battles for the conservation of America's natural resources. And among his followers, from cowhands to scholars to Boy Scouts, he kindles an enthusiasm that leads one of them to write, "I'm glad I lived when he was president." The hostess of Sagamore Hill, First Lady of the land, Edith Kermit Roosevelt. A strenuous life includes strenuous, freewheeling diplomacy. And in 1905, T.R. strides onto the world stage as mediator of the Russo-Japanese War. Aboard the presidential yacht Mayflower in Oyster Bay, he brings together high delegates from Russia and Japan and lays the basis for the peace treaty which will end the conflict and win him a Nobel Peace Prize. For all his international dealings, the president has a motto: speak softly and carry a big stick.